Instead, too, what we're doing is we're going to throw to an entirely different area now, and that's the area of disability employment. Now, if you're like me, you probably just think of people with intellectual or physical disabilities in terms of employment in like a sheltered workshop and making, craft items and things like that. And that, I imagine, is a model that's still going. But tonight we're talking to a lady, Carolyn Cross, who set up an organisation called Social Firms Australia. So rather than me do an awkward introduction, let's talk to her and find out exactly what it's about. Karen, come forward to the microphone a bit there. First of all, thanks for joining us in the middle of the night.
Thank you for inviting me, Simon.
No, that's fantastic. And tell me, what is Social Firms Australia, first of all?
Social Firms Australia is an organisation that was established in late 2004 to help people with a mental illness or other barrier to work get and keep a job. So it's a small organisation that has two areas of activity. One is social firm development, creating social firms. So there's business expertise which supports organisations who want to set up a social firm.
And so when we use the phrase social firm, what does that specifically refer to? It's not just a generic firm. What does it specifically refer to?
A social firm is one type of social enterprise. Social enterprise is a business venture which trades for a social purpose. There are two key characteristics of a social firm. Majority of income needs to be generated through the trade of the business, so it needs to be a commercially viable venture.
Right, it's not just something that's going to get government funding or that.
No, although it's understood if you have a certain number of staff who have barriers to work, there may inevitably be some productivity issues, so there will need to be some kind of support or subsidy to offset that loss of productivity. But the other key feature of a social firm is the fact that it's a mixed workforce of people with and without the mental illness, disability or other disadvantage.
Okay, I was going to say, because you mentioned mental illness, disability there a few times, but is it similar to people with a physical disability or just for people with a mental disability?
No, it can be for any population who have typically or traditionally faced some barrier to work. So people with a mental illness are very highly underrepresented in the workplace.
Oh, yes.
People with a disability as well. There are other populations who have barriers to work for a range of reasons, whether it's long-term unemployment or
just lazy like me. But in terms of that too, it must be such a barrier with people with disabilities. The very human, unfortunately, it seems to be attitude of, I don't want to think about that. Sort of, that's all a bit hard, it's all a bit embarrassing, what would I say, how would I treat them, do I have to, say certain things, what if I say, the wrong word? Is that a problem? Is it people's fears about how the interaction might work that hold them back from even trying?
I think not just the fear about the interaction, but the anxiety of how to provide support, anxiety about legislation that if there's somebody with a disability not performing as well as you might expect in the job, whether you'll be accused of being discriminatory if you look at it in a performance management perspective. A lot of employers have said they're sort of anxious about that, or if they do have to talk about changing somebody's role, they feel more uncomfortable if it's somebody with a disability. So I think there's probably a lot of unarticulated inhibitions, and particularly in the area of mental illness, there is often a lack of awareness, understandably, because there's not a lot of training given to employers on what are the supports and what the government can do to help.
Well, there's no training given to anyone, including employers or other employees either, is there?
There is training available.
But I mean, generally, in the general public, there doesn't seem to be a lot of understanding of that need, I suppose.
No, and I think there are regular attempts to raise awareness. The event that we're holding tomorrow night or tonight is...
It's very hard at this time of day, isn't it?
Somewhere in the next 12 hours.
Yeah.
It refers back to the International Day of People with a Disability that was on the 3rd of December and is one of a number of initiatives to help raise awareness of the capacity and ability of people with a disability or mental illness to work and contribute effectively to the community, and some of the supports and initiatives available.
And options that are there. Yes. Look, in a moment we're going to talk to Jeff Galvin, who to get a consumer perspective, if you like, as someone who's using the service or the opportunities afforded by the social firms concept. So we'll speak to Jeff in a moment, but just you mentioned the different facilities and things that are available to people, and we have got a call at the moment. We'll just go to from Mark in Sydney, who's got a question about contacts in Sydney. Good morning, Mark.
Hi, good morning, guys. Thanks for taking my call.
That's all right. Thanks for joining us. Carolyn's here. Did you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick run through my life. I left school back in 1988. I was diagnosed with visual impairment and Asperger syndrome as a child. Been looking for work for over 22 years. Done every TAFE course under the sun. Heaps of work experiences. But just cannot get a job. Been through several interviews and all the stuff. Thousands of application letters.
Right. Is it your condition that it's made it hard for you to get a job, like through interviews and so on, Mark? Is it people do you think have been put off by the Asperger's?
Yeah, I feel very much so. They apparently with Asperger syndrome, one of the traits is that the social contact skills are somewhat deprived, or there's a deficit. So I feel employers are very put off with that. But the number one thing I've always felt with employers is with the visual impairment, they think, occupational health and safety risks. No, we don't want to touch this guy with a 10-foot pole.
Right. Is that a problem, Carolyn, with visual impairment? Are there OH&S problems?
Well, I think the point that Mark has just raised confirms the need for social firms, that there is anxiety amongst employers. I think a lot of employers are so busy as well, focusing on the bottom line. They haven't got time to think about it, and the more we can encourage employers to consider offering employment to people like Mark, who are clearly very motivated, and I think that's something that's not acknowledged enough, that there's such a keen desire to work, and that's one of the most valuable characteristics. One of these social firms we're setting up, actually, Mark, is with an organisation called Info Exchange, based on a very successful one in Denmark called Specialist Turn, which draws on the strengths of many people with Asperger's syndrome who have a high capacity to concentrate for long periods of time and a high capacity to detect flaws. It's one that's in a growth industry, which is great, in software testing. So we've got that social firm ready to roll in Melbourne. We're just waiting for start-up funding.
Is there anything happening? Because I'm actually in Sydney, and I just can't seem to find anything in Sydney.
Right.
We have had some inquiries from Sydney. Our initial focus was Victoria. More recently, we have now broadened to other states. We are working in Brisbane as well, again on that software testing social firm, and the idea is that we'll replicate that around Australia once it's up and running. But we support organisations to set up social firms. We don't actually operate them ourselves.
No, it's more of an umbrella organisation, is it? But is there a website or something, for example, Carolyn, that Mark could you direct Mark to for SOFA that might be a handy thing?
I've got the website here on the browser. I was just really trying to find out if there's anything at all happening in Sydney, because I just can't seem to find anything at all.
Yes, there will be organisations in Sydney funded by the government, federal government, to help people such as yourself find and keep work. Centrelink would be the first port of call to find out which is the nearest one and who they would refer you to.
I wonder if that would be easier. You mentioned before that some organisations use the people with that have the advantage of Asperger's, as you said, they concentrate for long periods of time and so on. So often, if what we lose in one area, I suppose we gain in another. But I'm not sure if it would be a kindness to send someone like that to Centrelink. I don't know how you feel about Centrelink, Mark, but I think it can take a lot of patience to sit there and so on. Concentrating or not, I don't know if your experience has been in that area.
I've actually been with Centrelink, and I've actually been through about 12 different disability support job agencies.
Right.
And every time I've gone through them, they've loved to fill out all the paperwork and contracts and all that, but they actually don't get me in the interviews or nothing at all. And even the last one, I actually had serious problems with discrimination, where even the manager kicked me out. So, it's discrimination is absolutely rife.
And it's frustrating for you, but credit to you that you are, you remain motivated. And I think the reason why it's important to have social firms is that they dedicate a certain number of positions to people with a disability. So, we'll be actually looking for people such as yourself to apply for positions.
So, look, thanks for calling, Margaret, and keep at it. It sounds like there will be something coming down the track, and keep an eye on that website and see if it can come up soon.
Sure do. Thanks a lot.
Cheers. Thanks, Mark.
Bye.
Now, that was a very good point, actually. It's something, too, that you raised, that people with what we call a disability at the same time have other strengths. as well that can be used in a work situation. And it's fantastic to think that someone's been clever enough to work out, okay, well, if the person with Asperger's is better at this, at concentrating, whatever, we could use them in this sort of job. And that seems to be a sensible approach to people with different abilities.
Yes, the more there can be that kind of paradigm shift and looking at, is there a particular area where the features of this condition put this population at a competitive advantage. So that one is a great example, given it's in a growth industry and software testing is an area where it's quite difficult to recruit that level of expertise into. The other feature of it is the other staff in the social firm will get training on how best to support the employees with Asperger's. And what we would like to see is that there are relationships with other companies, so there can be opportunities for people to move on from the social firm into the broader workplace, and that staff in the broader workplace are better able to support people with conditions like Asperger's.
And like anything else, if you've had some experience with it, the next time you're going, oh, no, and Brian had Asperger's, he was fine. He was
Exactly.
at parties and he
Yes.
could concentrate for hours. So, yes, it's breaking down those initial hesitations and barriers, I'm sure. And look, another person we wanted to chat to on the phone, you know Jeff, of course, Jeff Galvins, organised through yourself, and he currently works for SOFA, in fact.
Correct.
As a peer educator, so let's talk to him and find out how that's all going. Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning, Simon. How are you?
Good, thank you. Thanks for joining us this morning.
No, it's enjoyable last hour of listening to Ed.
He was good, wasn't he, Ed?
Yes, I remember him writing for the magazines back when I was young.
Aha, there we go. Now, I'm always impressed with people with that sort of encyclopedic knowledge, whether it's about music or films or whatever, and you go, wow, there you go. And Jeff, what's your experience been?
I am what's called a consumer worker in general. I'm a peer educator for Social Firms Australia. I've also worked as an advocacy project worker for social firms, giving a voice to people like myself. I live with schizophrenia and have done so since the age of 28, or at least that's when I was diagnosed.
Right.
And trying to find mainstream work, especially when you've got a gap in your resume of a recovery period of 15 years, is very difficult. No matter how skilled or how well you present, you've got to explain away 15 years of unemployment, which people frown at. So that, plus the stigma of the word schizophrenia, which scares people something awful.
Is that, for example, something that they see? It's they look at your CV and it says Jeff Galvin, and then your address, and then it says schizophrenia, or is it something that comes up straight away like that? Or
You're not legally obliged to reveal things, but sometimes if you're someone like myself who I can't help but be honest, you do find yourself revealing things about yourself, and it does make life difficult. Admittedly, Social Firms Australia not only sets up social firms, but practices what it preaches in terms of its own employment policies within the organisation. I work with a team of 9 peer educators, all of whom have some diagnosis, not that I know their diagnosis.
Right.
And at the moment, in fact, our chap on reception is one of those peer educators working with mental illness in the organisation. So, yeah.
Okay. Now, when you say peer educator,
okay.
What does that mean exactly?
Well, we're delivering some training called Health Optimisation Program for Employment, funded by Department of Education, Employment and Work Relations, under a local employment access partnership system in 6 major areas of Victoria, areas with high unemployment amongst the group of people with mental illness. And it's a program where we, as a peer educator, we present the peer perspective and staying well when you're actually in work.
Right.
Because even when people do get work when they live with mental illness, there's an unfortunate history of them not surviving in the job.
Is that because it's hard, do you think, to day after day while you're coping with an illness as well?
It can be, and stress is a trigger for most of us, no matter which diagnosis you have. Stress is a major trigger, and even just starting a new job for anybody is an
incredibly stressful.
Big step in your life.
Yeah.
But to do it when you've been perhaps out of work for a good period of time and you live with a psychotic condition or a depressive condition, it makes it very hard, and you need extra support, you need ongoing support, and you need sympathetic co-workers who are trained, and you need to have destigmatised the workplace.
And also, as you say, it seems to be a great aspect. And Karen, is this something that was deliberately set up with SOFA that, as you mentioned before, criteria is to have people of different abilities, and some with disabilities and some not. Well, some not diagnosed. I think we've probably all got disabilities.
Yeah, and we often refer to disadvantaged and non-disadvantaged because your level of illness and your level of disability aren't always comparable. You can have a very low level of illness and a very high level of disability, and vice versa. It's a very complicated area.
Yeah, it's and what's your attitude to the language, Jeff? I mean, in terms of, we go through lots of different politically correct forms and so on. We used to talk about differently abled instead of disabled.
Yep.
What's the effect? What's it like?
I personally, at my age, having come through the system for so long, consider more the intent behind the words rather than the words themselves.
Okay.
And what the people mean and feel. Because there's some very old-fashioned people who use some very old-fashioned language, but their intention is good.
Yes, no, I know what you mean. I had a dear brother-in-law who sadly's passed away, and he was raised at 20 or 30 years earlier than us, by the sound of guessing at your age, and he was very well intentioned by it. But he was just so sexist. He didn't mean to be, and he was a lovely, lovely bloke. You did sort of, you gave him a bit of leeway because it's at the time he came from.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and we still use the term consumer in mental health, and it's widely disliked. But there's one older lady who I worked with at Sane Australia said we used to all be called patients. Yes, yeah.
The language is very important. There used to be, when I was growing up in Adelaide, there was a hospital called Home. What was it? I'll think of it a moment. Home for the Incurables.
Oh dear.
Now, how would you feel if you're, say, a kiddie and you're being driven by your... Where are we going, Daddy? You're going for your new house. What's that called? Home for the... So language can be incredibly important, can't it?
Which brings me round to the recovery model in mental illness that's grown up. It was once considered that schizophrenia was a degenerative disease, and that once you had been diagnosed, you would continue to get worse as time went on. Mm-hmm. Now, that's no longer considered the reality. The recovery model is, if embraced, can see people lead a much fuller life in time with treatment and therapy. Mm-hmm. And the icing on the cake of the recovery model is getting back to work.
Right. And is that something you've found as well, Caroline?
Yes. I think our vocabulary can hijack our perception, and if we say certain things are the case, we believe they're the case, and then we make that happen. And so I think
it is very hard, because it's also the sort of case you think, well, we go down the whole line of going chairpersons and so on instead of chairmen and chairwomen, and some of those have, I think, more value or more weight than others. But I think it's very important in this area because it's something that we do tend to tiptoe around. And
it's a funny one. I can call myself crazy, but nobody else is allowed to.
Exactly.
It's not quite fair.
No, I know exactly what you mean, though. It's a very good point. Look, Jeff, just hang on for a sec, if you will. If you're just joining us, by the way, folks, we're chatting to Caroline Cross from Social Firms Australia and Jeff Galvin, who works there, and about the employment opportunities and so on for people with different abilities. Here in the studio, we're chatting to Caroline Cross from Social Firms Australia, and on the phone we've got Jeff Galvin, who's joining us as well, and a few more callers coming in, giving us calls, which is great. And we've got an SMS here from Linda from Albany, wondering about if perhaps it would be a more equal strategy. Oh, I've hit the wrong button, I've lost her. Come back, Linda, there you are. More equal strategy would be a mandatory law where all employers and business owners are required to give 10% of all paid positions to disabled people. Can we legislate for that sort of thing, though, Caroline?
There are certain countries around the world that have systems like that.
Right.
Germany has a system where a certain number of positions should be offered to people with a disability, and if they don't, the business then pays a fine.
Right.
Some businesses apparently choose to pay the fine and just think we're not going to do that, but then that fine goes to help set up social firms. Right. I think there is an argument for it, but what we wouldn't want are workplaces where people are feeling resentful. And I think more energetic attempts to raise awareness amongst employers of the advantages of recruiting people with a mental illness or disability, that there is a lot of expertise, a lot of motivation, and the government does provide a range of different supports to help the employers.
And look, the motivation, I think, is a great point you mentioned there. It was, I think it was Mark, was it, from Sydney, who called up earlier, and the number of courses that he's done and attempts that he's made to get that. Is that something, Jeff, that you've found that if it's a almost swings and roundabouts in a way, if there are some parts that you're disadvantaged, there's other parts that you actually...
I personally am disadvantaged with my illness in that since falling unwell, I have a lot of trouble focusing academically, and I've virtually given up trying to add too many qualifications on because I set myself up to fail. That being said, as a consumer worker, I have successfully applied for and been working in the industry since 2003 in a lot of different positions. And
so you have learnt a lot then? I mean, it's not...
Most certainly. I've done service delivery and day programs. I've been a consultant in a clinical sector, a client liaison worker, and a...
So you're finding that's easier to learn in an experiential way then, rather than learn in an academic way?
And you've got to have the confidence to be able to talk your way into it.
Right. Okay, and that's
not everybody has that. Some people, the illness robs them of a lot of social skills and a lot of that sort of ability to converse and to sell yourself. They don't have that, and they need support to get work.
No, Leslie, the more you talk, the more it's bringing to mind to me the example of the musicians. I know lots of very, very talented musicians who aren't very successful because they just have no business sense.
Sure.
And that's a very similar thing, really.
And also, there's musicians who aren't entertainers. I have musician friends, and one in particular says he's an entertainer first and a musician second, and if you go in with that attitude, you'll get a lot more work. But if you stop mid-song to tune your guitar because you're such a prima donna that you can't play unless your guitar's tuned up, no, you're not going to make it.
No, that's a very good point, Jeff. Look, we've got a few calls, so I want to take them now. We've got Anne on the line from Penguin in Tasmania. Good morning, Anne.
Yes, good morning.
Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you for bringing it. Sorry if I'm a bit tired, so my thinking's a bit
Fair enough. I'm quite happy if we all go slowly at this time of day, Anne. Don't worry about that.
I have a 38-year-old daughter in the autism spectrum. She also has slight speech difficulties and language intake, but she's a bright, intelligent woman. Now, I've found in the past that, or over the 38 years, the government introduces pilot programs. They get people all excited about actually finding work, and then they withdraw the funds. So we've been through about 4 or 5 of those. I'm even finding it difficult to get her... she's very motivated to learn, and even at TAFE or the Polytech now, the course they had planned out for her, which was, she's very good with library books and that.
Yeah.
Even that course, when it came to the point of enrolling her, we just met a blank wall. And so for 2 years, she'd planned to work towards being a library aide, not a librarian.
Right.
She'll never be able to do that. But and then we faced the interview, and they just refused to let her even do the modules that had been selected. So there's a lot of discrimination.
Well, it's interesting too, Anne, that you bring up the number of different government schemes. Is that a problem, and is this something you've come across, Carolyn, where perhaps they're well-intentioned or they're trying to pay lip service, but then 6 to 12 months later they think, okay, well, that scheme drifts away and they start another scheme rather than following through on the first one?
I think there is quite a lot, and I think you're correct, well-intentioned, and sometimes a lot of these courses and temporary work experience opportunities become a substitute for the real thing, and it's like just having entrees instead of the real meal. That what people want is a job. They want a job that they can stay at, where they have meaningful relationships, no different from any of us. And it is frustrating that there are a lot of starters and promises, but it all comes to nothing. And I think...
Have you found that, Anne? The courses might be just a few months, and then after the end of the 6-week course, nothing
Well,
happens.
as I said, she worked for 2 years. She worked really hard at TAFE.
Right.
Knowing it had all been decided that she could do certain library modules with the intention of helping her because they were areas she's very good at, being, like you mentioned before, with sorry, I've lost the name, the other syndrome.
Asperger's, yeah.
When she's interested, she can concentrate for such long periods.
Well, that's a strength, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah. The ability to really focus on what they're doing. But I'm just now, I won't even entertain the thought of going to another pilot scheme.
Right.
So I suppose I'm not quite clear about what this...
the social firms approach.
Yes, social firms actually does. I sort of got a little bit lost somewhere, but can it help cover or prevent some of that frustration and difficulty? Kathy has never yet had work.
Right.
Except for me as work experience, where she did perfectly well as a clerical assistant.
Yeah, no, I think we'll go back to Carolyn now. Carolyn's with us in the studio, and she set up Social Firms Australia. And just to clarify again for us, Carolyn, social firms, what are they?
So a social firm is a real workplace like any other workplace, but it dedicates between 25 and 50% of the positions to people with a mental illness or disability. The software testing social firm I mentioned earlier is one that we've got ready to roll out in Melbourne. Brisbane would probably be the next location, but it's an area that's needed throughout Australia, so the vision is to have the software testing social firms in every state. We're waiting for start-up funding to get the first one off the ground, but then we'll be looking for contracts from a number of IT companies. We've already got some IT companies who've committed to supporting the social firm, and then we will be actively looking for people like your daughter to work in the social firm, because we acknowledge the barriers and the frustration that they and you, other carers and friends, have experienced, but also their capacity and motivation to work. And we know that we can tailor the workplace around the individual support needs. And we know that the other staff in a social firm can change the way they engage and interact with people who have particular support needs.
Oh, thank you. That's
But it takes time. That's the frustration. To set up a business that's going to be viable in the long term takes time.
Yes.
And for us, getting the start-up funding is the barrier at the moment.
That was my next question, was what do you have a time frame in mind?
We've got some applications into philanthropic trusts for the federal government for start-up funding. The federal government is looking at is developing a social enterprise development investment fund, which will offer soft loans to new social firms and social enterprises. However, if there's anybody out there with ideas of how to get the start-up funding of 250,000, we'd be very happy to hear from them, because as soon as it gets going, it'll be able to replicate reasonably quickly. It will still be months and years.
Oh, yes, years, I would think.
Yes, but at least it's a good program, and something that gives a bit of hope for the future, Anne. But
oh, look, it sounds wonderful. I won't take up any more of your time.
All right, well, look,
thank you very much. I'll keep listening with great interest.
All right, well, thank you very much for calling, Anne.
Bye.
Cheers. Jeff, is that an experience you've had as well, that there's government schemes that might be very well intentioned or tick the correct boxes, but then they've gone after 6 weeks and you're back where you started?
By definition, transitional employment is transitional, and it universally almost never leads to a full-time position. Often transitional employment is in what we call entry-level jobs, where people are perhaps at a work site washing dishes at a restaurant or doing very menial cleaning work. And while that work has to be done by somebody, it's often being offered to people who have skills way beyond the job's demands, and they get frustrated because they're being undervalued.
Right. No, I think that's a very good point. Look, we'll at this stage, it is, by the way, if you're just joining us, the discussion on the table that we've got this moment is about disability employment. And one of the approaches that looks fantastic with opportunity and potential is that of social firms that have a particular percentage of people who have disabilities. And also, I suppose, it's that element where you've got people with disabilities and people who don't, or would have different disabilities, we put it that way. It's that interaction that's probably so important.
Yes, and I think it does make much more sense to have a more integrated work environment rather than a social enterprise where the majority of people have the disadvantage that I think then we're just creating pods outside the mainstream world of work.
Well, that's the traditional image I have in my head of it, like a sheltered workshop of people with disabilities, and it's sort of, put them all over there out of the way and have just something almost like a hobby instead of anything useful work. And Jeff, I'm presuming I'll be arrogant and presume something about you without knowing you very well, but I'm sure you want a job and some sort of, fulfilment in that employment area like everyone else.
I've at the age of 53, resigned myself to knowing I'm going to be a consumer worker probably for the rest of my life in various different guises. I've tried for mainstream work, and the main barrier I've found, especially as a youngster, I worked in retail quite successfully as a relieving manager in a shoe chain before falling unwell. To return to retail after such a long gap, when so often they want young people, even though I have a breadth of knowledge of, say, popular culture for bookshops and DVD shops and all that sort of thing, I can't get a foot in the door.
Well, that's also, you're coming up now against the double disadvantage of being older.
Oh, yes, and I did spend 15 years in recovery, and early stages, the clinical treatment I was on had some dreadful side effects, and I was only just so in terms of wellness. Right. As time's gone by, I've gotten better. The side effects have minimised with the newer meds for me, not for everybody, and I'm a completely different person, I think Caroline could tell you, than when she first met me, apart from being 50 kilograms lighter and giving up a 75-day of cigarette habit a day. In the process, you do change and something goes click in your brain and you start that recovery path. But 15 years is a long time to be out of the workforce, and very hard to explain to an employer and to prove to an employer that you are capable of doing the work after such a long gap.
And we're better now. I'm not sure, Jeff, I think you're being very brave, whether it's saying to Carolyn, can we compare to what you were when she first met you? You don't know what she's going to say here on the open air, mate. You're taking a big risk there.
Well, I think one thing that has stayed consistent is Jeff's amazing communication skills. And I think that's something that we tend not to reflect on. And I think Jeff is an example of someone who has been dogged in his determination to overcome some of the challenges that the illness has presented.
And a very important point, what we keep saying, that people with what we call disabilities have strengths in other areas. And certainly that's something that's come through, I think, even just a few people we've spoken to tonight, that determination and that thing of, despite all the obstacles that have been placed in the way, just not going to give up. We like that, a bit of bloody-mindedness, nothing wrong with that. Now, we've got a quick call too, we've just got time to take from Ray in Round Mountain. Are you there, Ray? Good morning, Hello? Ray. Hello, buddy.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us this morning. Good. Yeah, we're running out of time, but we have a quick chat. What do you have for us tonight?
What?
Sorry, about the disabled pension, was it, Ray?
Yes, actually, I'm a polymath. I was overqualified. An interesting thing is, when the professional appointments business office used to exist in Martin Place in Sydney about 30, 40 years ago, I went in there and they said the only thing I was qualified for was to be head of protocol for the government.
Well, that's all right. Start there and off you go. Then you could have changed. You could have started there, changed the protocols, and you would never have lost the job.
Well, the whole point is this. You see, this job business today, some of your callers have brought this up, that people, these pieces of paper aren't worth anything. I mean, as I said, I'm a polymath. I can handle trades. My father taught me to use metal when I was a little boy. But I also happen to have professional skills. I'm a master salesman. I'm a master at virtually nearly everything.
But are you a master at dealing with the government in this sort of area? Because with a lot of these schemes, you've got to be pretty good at getting through all the convoluted, regulations and so on.
Well, that's it. You're over-regulated. I mean, for instance, a friend of mine, now he's a woodsman. Now, he had to get certain things you have to, under health and safety, which is the craziest and most bogged down set of regulations going when you're in an application. He had to get a chainsaw license, and the instructor told him, "Oh, you can't use the pointing end of the chainsaw." Well, how the hell do you cut a mortise? I mean, but the thing is, these pieces of paper...
Yeah, you're quite right. There's a lot of regulations there, but
they're not worth the paper.
And that's the problem too, as we were saying with Jeff. Often the instructions that you go through and the qualifications you receive aren't necessarily all that good. Okay, thanks for calling, Ray. We'll have to leave it there, mate. We've got to wrap up now. But
okay, I would love to talk to you some other time.
I'll keep calling.
Did you get that SMS?
Sorry, Ray.
by the way, from Ray about last night?
I think so. It's always hard to keep track of them, though.
About shipping, about the fact that the coastal shipping was pertinent. I mean, damn it, when I came here, I've been here 60 years. I'm in my 80s now. And I mean, I'm still plugging along. Thank God I've got a pension of some sort.
Well, that's the thing.
But you can't work.
Hard.
The last thing I did was on barter. I edited a book, and I got an exchange when there's Dragon programs for my computer. I won't do things for cash.
No, I think actually for barter's not a bad idea. But look, Ray, we'll have to leave it there because I just need to wrap up with Carolyn in the studio. But please call again. Thanks, Ray. Good night.
I'll do so. Bye.
Cheers. So it's a good point, I think, Ray, too, and that's as Ray brought up, another disability can be, by the way, employers look at, it can be age, of course. And bring that, as we were saying before, with Jeff. All right, well, look, we're wrapping up now. Thanks very much for coming in, Carolyn, and for joining us on the line, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if people have been listening and want more information, as we did from the caller from Tasmania and so on, what's the webs? There's always a website, is there, these days, Carolyn? Where should we send them to have a look?
Yes, www.socialfirms.org.au.
Right, socialfirms.org.au. Excellent. Or indeed, just Google the sofa, which is what I did. Or Google Carolyn Cross. It's amazing what you can get away with Googling these days. And Jeff, thanks again for calling in.
Thank you.
And I think with that dedication we heard about and the attention to detail and so on, then hopefully things will go well. And it's fantastic you've got the scheme there with the social firms.
Thank you very much, Simon.
Thanks, buddy. Cheers, mate. Cheers, Jeff.